Throughout history, certain forces have been recognized as fundamental and universal. We are talking about forces that infused and still infuse all existence. Among these, perhaps none has been more persistently acknowledged than Venus, the power of attraction and creation that operates across every domain of reality. Think about what a colossal position this is, seriously. Movements of planets, all human psyches, the growth of plants, the rise of civilizations, the fall of civilizations, this force, clothed as a goddess, has been summoned, celebrated, and studied. The Roman philosopher Cicero captured this universal quality perfectly in his etymology of the goddess's name. But to this goddess, because adres omnes veniret, she has an influence upon all things, we have given the appellation of Venus, from whom the word venustas, beauty, is rather derived than Venus from venustas. Venus because she comes to all things, venit ad omnia. Beyond Cicero's etymology, Venus entered our language through terms like venereal and veneration. Venus has deeply embedded her influence in our thinking and communication. Before we understood gravity, before we conceptualized chemical attraction or magnetic forces, Venus was the name given to that power that draws things together, that creates connection and generates life. In a way, we're all living under Venus's spell right now, that irresistible pull that brought you to watch this video and me to make it. Connection itself is her domain. From the earliest days, humans have summoned this force through ritual and poetry. The Orphic hymn to Venus begins with an invocation that acknowledges her cosmic scope. Heavenly Urania, illustrious, laughter-loving queen, sea-born, night-loving, of an awful mien, crafty from whom necessity and Anke first came, producing nightly all-connecting dame. 'Tis thine the world with harmony to join, for all things spring from thee, O power divine. A love goddess, sure, but more interestingly, it is a fundamental cosmic force. The all-connecting dame from whom all things spring. The hymn continues, emphasizing her universality. The triple fates are ruled by thy decree, and all productions yield alike to thee. Whate'er the heavens encircling all contain, earth fruit-producing and the stormy main, thy sway confesses and obeys thy nod. Across the Mediterranean world, similar invocations summoned this force into human consciousness. The Greek magical papyri preserve spells and prayers addressing Venus with language that reveals her centrality to human experience. I conjure you, most harmonious, most beautiful, and most fair Lady Venus, who lies in valor and in the might of love, who tortures the human flesh from within. O Venus, who rules over passion and distributes love. Most comely Venus, who leads every yearning in the hearts of men and women and moves the entrails of people. Attempts to articulate a lived experience of a power felt in the body, in nature, and in the cosmos, from Babylonians to Greeks and Egyptians to Romans and ancient magicians and Renaissance philosophers. The list is endless. This force has been recognized, named and summoned. Venus, Aphrodite, Ishtar, Astarte, the goddess who comes to all. I am Irrevelato. I peel back the veils between what is seen and what is known, excavating the universe to reveal information layers buried beneath millennia of worship and observation. Our approach is unapologetically interdisciplinary. We traverse everything, always converging on a single point, where the physical and the symbolic meet, where ancient wisdom illuminates contemporary understanding. We continue our exploration of celestial archetypes alongside Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, and other gods. Just as we examine Jupiter as simultaneously an astronomical body, a mythological figure, a psychological archetype, and a living symbol, we now turn our gaze to Venus, the force that comes to all. This journey demands your focus. In an age of fractured attention and simplified content, I provide the nourishing space for those with a rare hunger for depth, for those who recognize themselves as inheritors of a lineage stretching across civilizations and centuries. These explorations are your birthright. I will not waste your time with nonsense, though some may dismiss this approach from the beginning. All are invited to take a seat on this ride, whether you're a scholar, a seeker, or simply curious. I reveal a mode of perception where astronomical bodies are simultaneously physical entities and living symbols, where ancient myths contain psychological truths as relevant today as when they were first uttered in temples now reduced to dust. So join me on this rendezvous with Venus, yet be careful how you fall in love with her. The most famous origin story of Venus comes to us from Hesiod's Theogony, composed around the 8th century BC. It is a story both violent and beautiful, shocking in its raw imagery yet transcendent in its meaning. The genitalia themselves, freshly cut with flint, were thrown, clear of the mainland into the restless white-capped sea, where they floated a long time, a white foam from the godflesh. Collected around them, and in that foam a maiden developed and grew. Her first approach to land was near holy Cythera, and from there she floated onto the island of Cyprus. There she came ashore an awesome, beautiful divinity. Tender grass sprouted up under her slender feet. A remarkable genesis, isn't it? A goddess born from the severed genitals of Uranus, who was castrated by his son Cronus. This reveals how the ancient Greeks conceived the fundamental nature of Venus. She emerges from an act of violence that separates sky from earth, from the primal generative power cast into the chaotic waters. The foam, Aphros in Greek, gives her one of her names, as Plato notes in his Cratylus. The derivation of Aphrodite, born of the foam, Aphoros, may be fairly accepted on the authority of Hesiod. One can assume the birth from chaos, and the transformation of violence into beauty and harmony captures an essential truth about Venus. The truth is that she is the organizing principle that emerges from disorder, the coherence that forms from turbulence. The white foam collecting around the divine generative power suggests the moment of creation. It's wonderfully ironic, isn't it? The most beautiful goddess born from one of mythology's most violent moments. Perhaps that's Venus's first lesson to us. Beauty often emerges from chaos and pain, a truth any artist understands intimately. The Latin poet Ovid would later soften this origin story in his Metamorphoses, focusing more on the beautiful emergence than the violent castration, yet preserving the essential symbolism of birth from the sea. This dual quality, both violent and gentle, chaotic and harmonious, these would remain central to Venus's character throughout the ages. As Will Durant observes in the story of civilization, almost everywhere the earth was the Great Mother. Our language, which is often the precipitate of primitive or unconscious beliefs, suggests to this day a kinship between matter, materia, and mother, mater. Ishtar and Cybele, Demeter and Ceres, Aphrodite and Venus and Freya, these are comparatively late forms of the ancient goddesses of the earth, whose fertility constituted the bounty of the fields. Their birth and marriage, their death and triumphant resurrection, were conceived as the symbols or causes of the sprouting, the decay, and the vernal renewal of all vegetation. The foam-born goddess thus connects the celestial with the terrestrial, the cosmic with the earthy. She emerges from the primordial waters, which are none other than the boundary between order and chaos, bringing with her the power of generation and renewal. Her feet touch the earth, and tender grass sprouts beneath them, a life-giving force. From the moment of her spectacular birth, Venus embodied transformation and the emergence of beauty from chaos. These are themes that would resonate throughout her worship and across her many cultural manifestations. She was from the very beginning the goddess who both transcended and permeated the material world. Long before astronomical instruments could reveal its true nature, Venus commanded attention as the most brilliant object in the night sky after the moon. This celestial body's unique pattern of appearance, manifesting as both morning and evening star, provided humanity with one of its most enduring symbolic frameworks. The dual manifestation of Venus created such a powerful template for the cosmic duality that it transcended cultures, religions, and contexts. Perhaps nowhere is this more significant than in the Book of Revelation, where Christ explicitly identifies himself using Venus's celestial signature, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last," and specifically declares, "I am the bright morning star." Revelation 22:16. This appropriation of Venus's most distinctive astronomical feature reveals the planet's profound influence on human understanding of divinity. Just as Venus guides travelers at both dawn and dusk, the morning and evening star symbolism allowed early Christians to conceptualize Christ as both the initiator of creation, I am the Alpha, and its ultimate fulfillment, I am the Omega. Even as Christianity positioned itself against goddess worship, it nevertheless incorporated Venus's celestial pattern into its core symbolism of divine presence spanning all of time. What makes this astronomical inheritance particularly remarkable is how it persisted despite theological opposition. Venus's dual appearance provided such a perfect template that it survived the transition from polytheistic to monotheistic worldviews. Even when detached from her name and female form, Venus's celestial signature remained among us intimately. The movements and cycles of this celestial body fascinated ancient observers, who recognized patterns that seemed to connect the heavens with earthly affairs. Isaac Newton, in his Of Natural Philosophy, described the observable phenomena of Venus with scientific precision. That Mercury and Venus revolve about the Sun is evident from their moon-like appearances. When they shine out with a full face, they are, in respect of us, beyond or above the Sun. When they appear half full, they are about the same height on one side or other of the Sun. When horned, they are below or between us and the Sun. And they are sometimes, when directly under, seen like spots traversing the Sun's disk. Newton further notes, Venus, with a motion almost uniform, describes an orb nearly circular and concentric with the Sun. This scientific observation confirmed what ancient astronomers had long suspected. Venus's dance around the Sun followed a perfect and beautiful pattern that manifested visibly as her appearance as both morning and evening star. The Babylonians were particularly attentive to Venus's movements, as Will Durant notes. Astronomy developed slowly out of this astrologic observation and charting of the stars. As far back as 2000 BC, the Babylonians had made accurate records of the heliacal rising and setting of the planet Venus. For the Babylonians, Venus was associated with Ishtar, a powerful deity who governed both love and war. Every movement of this brilliant planet was thought to forecast events on Earth. Every planet was a god, interested and vital in the affairs of men. Jupiter was Marduk, Mercury was Nabu, Mars was Nergal, the Sun was Shamash, the Moon was Sin, Saturn was Ninib, Venus was Ishtar. Every movement of every star determined or forecast some terrestrial event. This brilliance left its mark even in personal names. Durant tells us of the Chinese poet Li Po. On the night of the poet's birth, his mother of the family of Li had dreamed of Taipo Sing, the great white star, which in the West is called Venus. So the child was named Li, meaning plum, and surnamed Taipo, which is to say the white star. The ancient Greeks and Romans similarly attributed special significance to Venus's celestial manifestation. Plato, in his Timaeus, describes how the creator god placed the planets in their orbits. First there was the moon in the orbit nearest the earth, and next the sun, in the second orbit above the earth. Then came the morning star and the star sacred to Hermes, moving in orbits which have an equal swiftness with the sun, but in an opposite direction. And this is the reason why the sun and Hermes and Lucifer overtake and are overtaken by each other. The orbit of Venus traces a perfect pentagram around Earth over an 8-year cycle, a fact known to ancient astronomers and considered deeply significant. This geometric pattern connects Venus to the golden ratio, sacred geometry, and mathematical beauty. Aristotle, in On the Universe, identifies Venus as the circle of the light-bearing star, which some call the Star of Venus, others the Star of Hera. This dual naming is clear evidence of the significance of Venus across cultures and traditions. Cicero, in On the Nature of the Gods, marvels at the mathematical perfection of Venus's movements. The lowest of these 5 planets and nearest the Earth is that of Venus, called in Greek Phosphoros. Before the rising of the sun, it is called the morning star, and after the setting, the evening star. It has the same revolution through the zodiac, both as to latitude and longitude with the other planets in a year, and is never more than 2 signs from the sun, whether it precedes or follows it. I cannot therefore conceive that this constant course of the planets, this just agreement in such various motions through all eternity, can be preserved without a mind, reason, and consideration. In this observation, Cicero captures something profound about Venus as both a physical celestial body and a metaphysical principle. The mathematical harmony, the just agreement of Venus's movements, suggested to ancient observers a cosmic intelligence. Venus the planet was a visible manifestation of Venus the principle, the force that creates order, harmony, and beauty. The brilliance of Venus in the night sky, appearing alternately as morning and evening star, became a perfect symbol for the goddess's dual nature, a theme that would become central to understanding her psychological and metaphysical significance. Few thinkers have investigated the psychological aspects of the Venusian dual nature more profoundly than Carl Jung. In his extensive work on archetypes and the collective unconscious, Jung knew that Venus is a fundamental psychic pattern that manifests in human experience across cultures and throughout history. In the archetypes and the collective unconscious, Jung identifies a terrifying paradox in how the goddess presents herself to human consciousness. He will need no explanations to understand what was the tension of opposites expressed by Apuleius in his magnificent prayer to the Queen of Heaven, when he associates heavenly Venus with Proserpina, who striketh terror with midnight ululations. It was the terrifying paradox of the primordial mother image. This juxtaposition of Venus, goddess of love and beauty, with Proserpina, queen of the underworld, captures the essential duality that Jung saw operating in the Venus archetype. She is both celestial and chthonic, both creative and destructive, both nurturing and devouring. This duality appears across cultures. In Babylonian tradition, as Will Durant notes, Ishtar, the Venus equivalent, embodied seemingly contradictory qualities. It is impossible to find much harmony, from a modern point of view, in the attributes and functions of Ishtar. She was the goddess of war as well as of love, of prostitutes as well as of mothers. She called herself a compassionate courtesan. She was represented sometimes as a bearded bisexual deity, sometimes as a nude female offering her breasts to suck. And though her worshippers repeatedly addressed her as the Virgin, the Holy Virgin, and the Virgin Mother, this merely meant that her amours were free from all taint of wedlock. This apparent contradiction makes perfect sense when we understand Venus as a fundamental force rather than the basic image of a personified deity so superficially sketched in the face of its brilliance and madness. As a principle of attraction, generation, and transformation, Venus operates across all domains of existence. In Jung's terms, she is an archetype that bridges consciousness and the unconscious, the celestial and the chthonic. In Ion, Jung explores this duality further through Venus's connection to fish symbolism. They owe these bad qualities, most of all, to their relationship with the mother and love goddess Ishtar, Astarte, Atargatis, or Aphrodite. As the planet Venus, she has her exaltatio in the zodiacal sign of the fishes. Thus, in astrological tradition, as well as in the history of symbols, the fishes have always had these opprobrious qualities attached to them, while on the other hand, laying claim to a special and higher significance. The theme of duality appears explicitly in Plato's Symposium, where he distinguishes between two Aphrodites. The elder one, having no mother, who is called the heavenly Aphrodite, she is the daughter of Uranus. The younger, who is the daughter of Zeus and Dione, her we call common, and the love who is her fellow worker is rightly named common, as the other love is called heavenly. Plato elaborates on this distinction. The love who is the offspring of the common Aphrodite is essentially common and has no discrimination, being such as the meaner sort of men feel, and is apt to be of women as well as of youths, and is of the body rather than of the soul. But the offspring of the heavenly Aphrodite is derived from a mother in whose birth the female has no part. She is from the male only. This is that love which is of youths, and the goddess being older, there is nothing of wantonness in her. Thus Plato provides a philosophical distinction between heavenly and common Aphrodite. The parallels and complements Jung's view on the dual manifestation of archetypes. In alchemical symbolism, which Jung studied extensively, this duality appears as Venus alba et rubea, white and red Venus, representing different stages of psychological transformation. In Mysterium Conjunctionis, Jung notes how alchemy symbolized this duality. The Tractatus Aureus de Lapide says of the arcane substance, that noble whore Venus is clothed and enveloped in abounding color. This color has a reddish appearance. The nobility of this Venus derives from the fact that she is also the queen, the chaste bride of the king. The paradoxical noble whore perfectly captures the tension that Jung identified in the Venus archetype. She is both the most base and the most elevated, both the most carnal and the most spiritual. For Jung, these contradictions were not logical problems to be resolved, because their reality cannot be contested, because they are psychological realities. And the best thing one can do is to integrate them. Venus represents a fundamental power in the psyche that manifests in multiple, seemingly contradictory ways. Venus in her fullness means embracing both the celestial and the chthonic, which means both her creative and destructive potentials. In psychological terms, Venus is both our capacity for connection and our fear of dissolution, both our desire for beauty and our terror of chaos. Think about your most intimate relationship, how it contains both tremendous comfort and vulnerability, that delicious terror of truly being seen by another person. That's Venus working through you, the goddess who refuses to let us experience connection without risk. She is, as Jung recognized, a force that comes to all aspects of the psyche, bridging conscious and unconscious, rational and irrational, spiritual and material. The alchemists of the medieval and Renaissance periods also knew that Venus is a transformative power that operated both in the material world and in the human soul. They constructed a complex symbolic system that expressed profound psychological truths through chemical and metallurgical metaphors, with Venus playing a central role in the process of transformation. In alchemical tradition, Venus was associated with the metal copper, as Carl Jung explains in the Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. As we said, the cross with a little circle in it is the alchemical sign for copper, cuprum from Kypris, Aphrodite. And the sign for Venus is, remarkably enough, it is the old apothecary's sign for spiritus tartari, tartaric acid, which literally translated means spirit of the underworld. This connection between Venus, copper, and the spirit of the underworld again highlights the goddess's dual nature. Heavenly and chthonic qualities operating in both the material and spiritual domains. In Mysterium Conjunctionis, Jung elaborates on the alchemical understanding of Venus as a transformative substance. As every alchemist knew, gold owes its red color to the admixture of Q, copper, which he interpreted as Kypris, the Cyprian Venus, mentioned in Greek alchemy as the transformative substance. The alchemists organized their great work, the process of spiritual and material transformation, into stages or regimens associated with different planetary powers. The regimen of Venus was a crucial phase in this process, as Jung describes. The color green, stressed by Kunrat, is associated with Venus. The Introitus Apertus says, but in the gentle heat the mixture will liquefy and begin to swell up, and at God's command will be endowed with spirit, which will soar upward carrying the stone with it, and will produce new colors, first of all the green of Venus, which will endure for a long time. Towards the end of this procedure, which was known as the regimen of Venus, the color changes into a livid purple, whereupon the philosophical tree will blossom. The regimen of Venus thus represented a stage of growth and vitality associated with the color green that eventually transitions towards spiritual maturation, represented by purple. This color transformation symbolized psychological development, the greening of the psyche followed by its spiritualization. One of the most striking alchemical symbols associated with Venus was the green lion, which Jung describes. Evidently on account of its close connection with Venus, the green lion has, surprisingly enough, rose-colored blood, as mentioned by Dorn and by his contemporary Kunrath. The latter ascribes rose-colored blood to the Filius macrocosmi as well. This peculiarity of the green lion's blood establishes its connection not only with the Filius, a well-known Christ parallel, but above all with the rose, whose symbolism produced not only the popular title, Rosarium, Rose Garden, but also the Rosenkreuz, Rosy Cross. The green lion with rose-colored blood is a perfect alchemical image for Venus's transformative power. The green representing growth and vitality, the rose-colored blood suggesting both sacrifice and spiritual love. The alchemists would have had a field day with dating apps. All those hopeful souls trying to transmute a casual swipe into a golden connection. We're still practicing Venus's alchemy, just with different laboratory equipment. Alchemical processes often involved the chemical wedding or sacred marriage of opposing principles, frequently represented as king and queen, sun and moon, or sulfur and mercury. Venus played a crucial role in this conjunction, as Jung notes. In other texts, Venus represents the queen at the wedding, as in the Introitus Apertus. See to it that you prepare the couch of Venus carefully, then lay her on the marriage bed, etc. In general, Venus appears as the feminine aspect of the king, or as we should say, his anima. The alchemical conjunction aimed to produce the philosopher's stone or lapis philosophorum, the ultimate transformative substance. Jung observes that the relationship between Venus and this stone has ancient roots. The relation of the stone to Venus occurs as early as the Greek texts, which speak of the Cytherean stone and the pearl of Cythera. In the Arabic Book of Crates, Venus is endowed with tincturing power. She is therefore called scribe. This tincturing power refers to Venus's ability to transform base substances into noble ones, plumbum into gold in material alchemy, the profane soul into the sacred in spiritual alchemy. The alchemists also recognized Venus's connection to sulfur, another key substance in their work. In addition to so many other qualities, sulfur shares this extreme paradox with Mercurius, besides having like him a connection with Venus, though here the illusion is veiled and more discreet. Our Venus is not the common sulfur, which burns and is consumed with the combustion of the fire and of the corruption, but the whiteness of the Venus of the sages is consumed with the combustion of the white and the red, albidinis et rubidinis, and this combustion is the entire whitening dilbatio of the whole work. The distinction between common sulfur and the Venus of the sages parallels Plato's distinction between common and heavenly Aphrodite, suggesting that the alchemists were drawing on ancient wisdom in their understanding of Venus as a transformative power. Perhaps the most profound alchemical insight regarding Venus appears in Jung's analysis of a parable from De Sulphura, about an alchemist who is seeking the sulfur. His quest leads him to the grove of Venus, and there he learns through a voice, which later turns out to be Saturn's, that sulfur is held a prisoner at the command of his own mother. He is praised as the artificer of 1,000 things, as the heart of all things, as that which endows living things with understanding, as the begetter of every flower and blossom on herb and tree, and finally, as the painter of all colors. This might well be a description of Eros. Venus is thus the mother of the transformative principle, sulfur eros, the container of the creative power that must be released and properly directed for the work to succeed. For the alchemists, as for Jung, Venus represented not merely a mythological figure, but a living psychic reality, a force of transformation that operates in matter, in mind, in nature, in soul. Throughout the ancient world, Venus was contemplated deeply, but she was also actively invoked through magical and ritual practices. These operations sought to channel the goddess's power for various purposes, most commonly related to love, beauty, and harmony, but sometimes extending to other domains as well. The Greek magical papyri, a collection of magical texts from Greco-Roman Egypt, dating from the 2nd century BC to the 5th century AD, contain numerous spells and invocations to Venus Aphrodite. One such spell reveals both the power attributed to the goddess and the intimate manner in which practitioners sought to engage with her. Aphrodite's name, which becomes known to no one quickly, is Neferieki. This is the name. If you wish to win a woman who is beautiful, be pure for 3 days, make an offering of frankincense, and call upon this name over it. You approach the woman and say it 7 times in your soul as you gaze at her, and in this way it will succeed. But do this for 7 days. The use of secret divine names reflects the belief that knowing a deity's true name gave the practitioner special access to their power. The requirement for ritual purity and specific offerings shows that approaching Venus was not casual, but required proper preparation and respect. Another spell from the papyri demonstrates the range of Venus's influence. Mother of all, who bore love; Aphrodite, lamp-bearer shining and aglow; Selene, star-coursing, Haecale, torch-bearer; fire-breather, woman four-faced, four-named, four-roads mistress. Hail, goddess, and attend your epithets, O heavenly one; harbour goddess, who roam the mountains and are goddess of the crossroads. O nether one, goddess of depths, eternal, goddess of dark, come to my sacrifices. Here Venus is invoked as a love goddess, but also as the cosmic power associated with light, fire, the stars, and even the underworld, goddess of depths and goddess of dark. She is four-faced and four-named, suggesting her universal presence and power that manifests in multiple forms. The Orphic hymns similarly capture Venus's magical significance. The hymn to Venus ends with a direct invocation. Come, all attractive to my prayer inclined, for thee I call, with holy reverent mind. This calling of the goddess was a literal summoning of her presence and power into the practitioner's life and work. Medieval and Renaissance magical texts continued this tradition. The Hygromanteia, a Byzantine magical text, includes this powerful invocation. In the name of the most supreme God, in his most desirable name, I conjure you, most harmonious, most beautiful, and most fair Lady Venus, who lies in valor and in the might of love, who tortures the human flesh from within. O Venus, who rules over passion and distributes love, most comely Venus, who leads every yearning in the hearts of men and women and moves the entrails of people. O Lady, crowned with the wreath of love, I beseech thee for your power, in order to torture the people I want, and make them fall under my feet. I conjure you, Venus, by God who created you and placed you in the heaven. I conjure you by the seal that is in your heart, by your wreath, by your heaven, and in your following names: Montuaran, Maugoran, Kyrioul, Purgaton, Lioikon, Icarizi, Eakor, Ladokon, Parinos, Frectius, Falumpol, Krypophon, Aliopon, Estoj, Iasef, Zaglitai, Kriganos, Ulan. In your above names do not disobey me, but grant your grace and your virtue in the work I am going to attempt. This text reveals the darker aspects of Venus magic, compelling love, using the goddess's power to torture and dominate others. Venus's dual nature as both beneficent and potentially dangerous is fully acknowledged in magical practice. The Picatrix, a comprehensive manual of astrological magic from the 10th/11th century, includes detailed instructions for working with Venus's power. May God bless you, O Venus, you who are queen and fortune, and are cold and moist, equitable in your effects and complexion, pure and lovely and sweetly scented, beautiful and ornate. You are the lady of adornment, of gold and silver. You delight in love, joy, ornaments and jests, elegance, songs and music that are sung or played on strings, written music and song played on organs, games and comforts, rest and love. The text continues with a formal conjuration. I invoke you by all your names. That is, in Arabic, Zohara; in Latin, Venus; in Persian, Anihit; in Roman, Aphrodita; in Greek, Admenita; in Indian, Saka. In conjure you by the Lord God, the Lord of the highest firmament, and by the obedience you offer to God, and by the power and lordship he has over you, that you listen to my prayer and consider my petition. The listing of Venus's names in multiple languages demonstrates her universal presence across cultures, while the invocation through divine authority reflects the hierarchical magical worldview of the medieval period. Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy provides a comprehensive description of Venus's magical attributes. Venus is called the Lady, nourishing, beautiful, starry, glittering, pretty, gentle, very powerful, fertile lady of love and beauty, original parent of the races of the world and men, who in the first beginning of things united the 2 different sexes in love. and with the eternal offspring of men and species of animals propagate daily. Beyond textual sources, archaeological evidence reveals Venus's central role in ritual practices across the ancient world. Will Durant describes one striking Babylonian custom associated with Ishtar, Venus. The most striking feature of Babylonian life to an alien observer was the custom known to us chiefly from a famous page in Herodotus. Every native woman is obliged once in her life to sit in the temple of Venus and have intercourse with some stranger. While this account may be exaggerated, it reflects the recognition of Venus's power over sexuality and fertility, and the belief that this power could be accessed through ritual practices. Magical and ritual approaches to Venus reflect a worldview in which divine forces could be directly engaged through proper invocation and ceremony. For the ancient and medieval practitioners, Venus was an immediately accessible power that could be channeled, directed, and applied to specific needs and desires. The whispered incantations and carefully prepared rituals represent humanity's attempts to participate consciously in the Venusian force that pervades the cosmos, to bring the universal principle of attraction and harmony into particular focus for practical purposes. Before you dismiss these ancient practices too quickly, consider your own Venus rituals, the carefully chosen outfit for a date, the particular way you arrange your home before inviting someone special over. We're still performing Venus magic, we've just forgotten to call it by its name. Perhaps no philosopher has more eloquently captured Venus's role as the generative principle in nature than the Roman poet Lucretius. In his masterwork De Rerum Natura, on the nature of things, Lucretius begins with a magnificent invocation to Venus that establishes her as the fundamental creative force in the cosmos. Mother of Rome, delight of gods and men, dear Venus that beneath the gliding stars, make us to teem the many-voyaged main, and fruitful lands for all of living things. Through thee alone are evermore conceived, through thee are risen to visit the great sun. Before thee, goddess, and thy coming on, flee stormy wind and massy cloud away. For thee the daedal earth bears scented flowers, for thee waters of the unvexed deep. Smile, and the hollows of the serene sky glow with diffused radiance for thee. This is no mere poetic flourish, but a philosophical statement of profound significance. For Lucretius, following the Epicurean tradition, Venus represents the principle of generation and attraction that operates throughout nature. She is not simply the goddess of human love, but the force that maketh to teem both sea and land, through whom all of living things are evermore conceived. This view finds parallel in Cicero's famous observation, quoted in On the Nature of the Gods, that saying of Terence, "Without Ceres and Bacchus Venus starves." This proverb acknowledges Venus's dependence on material sustenance, food and wine, represented by Ceres and Bacchus, while also recognizing her as a fundamental natural drive. Venus is not separate from nature, but is nature's generative impulse, requiring proper conditions to flourish. Will Durant's description of Venus Ishtar in The Story of Civilization captures this understanding of the goddess as a creative principle. She was Demeter as well as Aphrodite, no mere goddess of physical beauty and love, but the gracious divinity of bounteous motherhood, the secret inspiration of the growing soil, and the creative principle everywhere. This creative principle everywhere is precisely what Lucretius celebrates in his invocation, Venus as the force that not only generates life, but continually renews and sustains it. Aristotle, in On the Soul, discusses a related concept when addressing theories of motion and attraction. Some go so far as to hold that the movements which the soul imparts to the body in which it is are the same in kind as those with which it itself is moved. An example of this is Democritus, who uses language like that of the comic dramatist Philippus, who accounts for the movements that Daedalus imparted to his wooden Aphrodite by saying that he poured quicksilver into it. While Aristotle critiques this mechanistic view, the reference to a wooden Aphrodite, animated by quicksilver, reflects the ancient understanding of Venus as a principle of movement and animation, the force that gives life to the inanimate. The Roman understanding of Venus as a creative principle took on political dimensions as well. The Julian family claimed descent from Venus through Aeneas, making the goddess not only a natural force, but a progenitor of Roman greatness. Venus thus became associated with the generative power not only of plants and animals, but of entire civilizations. In philosophical terms, Venus represents what we might now call the principle of attraction or affinity, the tendency of certain things to be drawn together, to combine, to generate new forms. Modern science would eventually articulate this through concepts like gravity, chemical bonding, and electromagnetic attraction. But the ancient intuition of Venus as the universal attractive force anticipated these discoveries. When physicists finally discover the unified field theory, I wouldn't be surprised if they name it after Venus. Science has spent millennia catching up to what the ancients intuited, that attraction is the fundamental force binding our universe together. This understanding of Venus as nature's generative pulse connects directly to her dual aspect discussed earlier. The same force that creates also destroys. The same principle that brings things together eventually dissolves them. As Durant notes regarding the Mesopotamian myth of Ishtar and Tammuz, lovelier than this vague memory of some catastrophic inundation is the vegetation myth of Ishtar and Tammuz. In the Babylonian form, he is sometimes her lover, sometimes her son. Both forms seem to have entered into the myths of Venus and Adonis, Demeter and Persephone, and 100 scattered legends of death and resurrection. Tammuz, son of the great god Ea, is a shepherd pasturing his flock under the great tree Erida, which covers the whole earth with its shade, when Ishtar, always insatiable, falls in love with him and chooses him to be the spouse of her youth. But Tammuz, like Adonis, is gored to death by a wild boar and descends, like all the dead, into that dark subterranean Hades, which the Babylonians called Aralu. This cycle of generation, death and rebirth, symbolized in the relationship between Venus Ishtar and her dying and rising consort, reflects the natural processes of growth, decay and renewal. Venus is the force that reclaims life only to generate it anew in an eternal cycle. Homer's epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, are the most detailed portraits of Venus in her Greek form as Aphrodite, a living goddess, complete with desires, vulnerabilities, and a distinctive personality. Throughout the Iliad, Venus plays a crucial role in the Trojan War, consistently supporting the Trojans, particularly Paris and her son Aeneas. Her most dramatic intervention occurs in Book 5, when she attempts to rescue Aeneas from the Greek hero Diomedes. Lost in a dizzy mist, the warrior lies. A sudden cloud comes swimming o'er his eyes. There the brave chief, whom mighty numbers swayed, oppressed had sunk to death's eternal shade. But heavenly Venus, mindful of the love, she bore Anchises in the Idaean grove, his danger views with anguish and despair, and guards her offspring with a mother's care. About her much-loved son her arms she throws, her arms whose whiteness match the falling snows. Screened from the foe behind her shining veil, the swords wave harmless and the javelins fail. Safe through the rushing horse and feathered flight of sounding shafts, she bears him from the fight. This vivid description shows Venus as a protective mother, using her divine power to shield her son from mortal weapons. It's notable that her motivation is explicitly maternal. She acts mindful of the love she bore Anchises, Aeneas's father, with whom she had a famous liaison. But what happens next is even more remarkable. Diomedes, with special aid from Athena, actually wounds the goddess. The raging chief in chase of Venus flies, no goddess she, commissioned to the field, like Pallas dreadful with her sable shield, or fierce Bellona thundering at the wall, while flames ascend and mighty ruins fall. Venus, unlike war goddesses such as Athena or Bellona, is not accustomed to battlefield violence. When wounded, she reacts with shock and pain, fleeing to Olympus. This said, she wiped from Venus's wounded palm the sacred ichor and infused the balm. Juno and Pallas with a smile surveyed, and thus to Jove began the blue-eyed maid. The sacred ichor, divine blood, flowing from Venus's hand reveals a startling vulnerability. Even Zeus, her father, gently reproves her for entering the battlefield. The sire of gods and men superior smiled, and calling Venus, thus addressed his child. Not these, O daughter, are thy proper cares. Thee milder arts befit, and softer wars. Sweet smiles are thine, and kind endearing charms. To Mars and Pallas leave the deeds of arms. This scene humanizes Venus, while also defining her domain. Sweet smiles and kind endearing charms, rather than warfare. Yet it would be a mistake to see Homer's Venus as merely frivolous. Her power, while different from martial prowess, is no less significant in shaping human destiny. Perhaps the most famous story of Venus in Homer appears not in the Iliad, but in the Odyssey, where the bard Demodocus entertains the Phaeacians with the tale of Venus's affair with Mars and their capture in a magical net crafted by her husband, Hephaestus. The minstrel struck the opening chords to his sweet song, how war god Ares loved the fair-crowned Aphrodite, how in Hephaestus's own home they first had sex in secret, and how Ares gave her many gifts while he disgraced the marriage bed of Lord Hephaestus. The tale continues with Hephaestus's clever trap, but then the crafty net made by Hephaestus's great skill fell down around them, so they could not move their limbs or shift their bodies. After a while they realized they could not get out. Then the famous crippled god came back to them, turning round before he reached the land of Lemnos. Helios had stayed on watch and gave him a report. With a grieving heart, Hephaestus went into his home and stood inside the doorway, gripped by cruel rage. When caught, the pair become objects of divine amusement. Lord Apollo, son of Zeus, questioned Hermes. Hermes, son of Zeus, you messenger and giver of good things, how would you like to lie in bed by golden Aphrodite, even though a strong net tied you down? The messenger god, killer of Argus, then said in his reply, Far-shooting Lord Apollo, I wish there were 3 times as many nets, impossible to break, and all you gods were looking on if I could lie down there, alongside golden Aphrodite. This humorous episode reveals several important aspects of Homer's Venus. First, she is associated with irresistible desire, even worth being bound in unbreakable nets to be near. Second, she is capable of transgression, violating marriage vows for passion. Third, she is resilient and undaunted. After her release, the Odyssey tells us, after saying this, powerful Hephaestus then untied the netting. Both gods, once they had been released from their strong chains, jumped up immediately. Ares went off to Thrace, and laughter-loving Aphrodite left for Paphos, in Cyprus, for her sanctuary, her sacred altar. Once there, the Graces bathed, and then anointed her with heavenly oil, the sort that gleams upon the gods who live forever. Next, they took some gorgeous clothes and dressed her. The sight was marvelous to behold. Venus emerges from humiliation glorified, bathed and anointed, dressed in marvelous clothes, an ode to her enduring power despite momentary capture. In another significant scene from the Odyssey, Venus serves as a reference point for extraordinary beauty. When Penelope finally emerges to meet Odysseus, then wise Penelope emerged out of her room, looking like Artemis or golden Aphrodite. This comparison to Venus represents the highest possible praise for a woman's beauty in the Homeric world. Homer understood something our celebrity magazines miss, that true beauty contains both vulnerability and power. When we call someone stunning, we're unconsciously acknowledging this Venusian truth. Real beauty stops us in our tracks and changes us forever. These Homeric portrayals established Venus as a complex figure in Western literature. Powerful yet vulnerable, divine yet relatable, a figure of desire and beauty who influences human affairs through her distinctive powers. The Homeric Venus truly comes to all aspects of human experience, from battlefields to bedchambers, from divine councils to mortal households. While Venus may be most familiar to us through her Greek and Roman incarnations, she existed under various names across numerous ancient cultures, each emphasizing different aspects of her nature while maintaining certain core characteristics. This cross-cultural persistence speaks to something fundamental in human experience that recognized and honored the Venusian principle. In Mesopotamia, she was known as Ishtar, a powerful deity who combined attributes that later cultures would often separate. Will Durant describes her complex nature, Ishtar, Astarte to the Greeks, Ashtoreth to the Jews, interests us not only as analogue of the Egyptian Isis and prototype of the Grecian Aphrodite and the Roman Venus, but as the formal beneficiary of one of the strangest of Babylonian customs. She was Demeter as well as Aphrodite, no mere goddess of physical beauty and love, but the gracious divinity of bounteous motherhood, the secret inspiration of the growing soil and the creative principle everywhere. Babylonian hymns to Ishtar reveal the depth of devotion she inspired. One remarkable prayer preserved by Durant shows her veneration as a cosmic power. I beseech thee, Lady of Ladies, Goddess of Goddesses, Ishtar, Queen of all cities, Leader of all men. Thou art the light of the world, thou art the light of heaven, mighty daughter of Sin, the moon god. Supreme is thy might, O Lady, exalted art thou above all gods. Thou renderest judgment, and thy decision is righteous. Unto thee are subject the laws of the earth and the laws of heaven, the laws of the temples and the shrines, the laws of the private apartment and the secret chamber. Where is the place where thy name is not? And where is the spot where thy commandments are not known? This hymn portrays Ishtar as not merely a goddess of love, but a universal sovereign whose authority extends to all domains, public and private, sacred and secular. She renders judgment, makes righteous decisions, and establishes laws, functions that later cultures would often attribute to male sky gods. The prayer continues with a striking description of Ishtar's power over life and death. Where thou glancest, the dead come to life, and the sick rise and walk. The mind of the diseased is healed when it looks upon thy face. This healing and life-giving aspect connects to the goddess's fundamental nature as a force of regeneration and vitality across cultures. In Egypt, Venus was associated with several goddesses, particularly Hathor and aspects of Isis, both connected to love, beauty, and fertility. The syncretism between these goddesses and their Greco-Roman counterparts became particularly pronounced during the Ptolemaic period, as Jung notes in Ion when discussing the connection between Venus and fish symbolism. This story carries echoes of numerous kindred motifs in East and West, for instance, that of Leto and Python, of Aphrodite and her son, who, when pursued, leapt into the Euphrates and were changed into fishes, and of Isis and Horus in Egypt. The Syrian Greeks identified Derceto Atargatis and her son Ichthys with the constellation of the fishes. This passage reveals the complex web of mythic associations that connected Venus figures across different Mediterranean cultures. Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos provides valuable information about regional Venus worship in the ancient world. The nature of the inhabitants of these countries is obedient to the dominion of these ruling influences. They worship Venus under the name of Isis, and they also pay devotion to Saturn, invoking him by the name of Mithranelios. Many of them likewise foretell future events, and they consecrate to the gods some of their bodily members, to which superstition they are induced by the nature of the figuration of the planets before mentioned. Ptolemy also notes specific regions, particularly associated with Venus. The inhabitants of the Cyclad Isles, and of the shores of Asia Minor, and of Cyprus, are more particularly under the influence of Taurus and Venus, and are therefore voluptuous, fond of elegance, and overstudious in their attention to the body. In regions ruled by Venus, Ptolemy observes distinct cultural characteristics. Through the influence of Venus, they are also lovers of the arts and sciences, as well as of music and poetry, of public shows, and all the refinements of life. And from Mercury, they deduce their hospitality, their fondness for society and communion, their love of equity and of literature, and their power of eloquence. They are also in the highest degree conversant with sacred mysteries, owing to the Vespertine figuration of Venus. These observations suggest that Venus worship was associated not only with love and beauty, but with artistic achievement, social harmony, hospitality, and even mystical knowledge. Cicero, in On the Nature of the Gods, distinguishes between different Venus deities recognized in the ancient world. The first Venus, who has a temple at Elis, was the daughter of Cyaelum and Dies. The second arose out of the froth of the sea and had by Mercury the second Cupid. The third, the daughter of Jupiter and Diona, was married to Vulcan, but is said to have had Anteros by Mars. The fourth was a Syrian, born of Tiro, who is called Astarte. and is said to have been married to Adonis. A passage that reveals the ancient awareness of Venus's multiple cultural manifestations and the attempts to organize them genealogically. Notably, the fourth Venus mentioned is the Syrian Astarte, another name for Ishtar, explicitly linking the Mesopotamian goddess to the Greco-Roman tradition. The cross-cultural prevalence of Venus worship suggests a universal human recognition of the power she represents. Whether as Ishtar's sexual potency, Aphrodite's captivating beauty, or Venus's generative fertility, the goddess embodies a force that humans across cultures have experienced as central to existence. This universality appears vividly in a passage from Durant describing the cult of Ishtar. The most striking feature of Babylonian life, to an alien observer, was the custom known to us chiefly from a famous page in Herodotus. Every native woman is obliged once in her life to sit in the temple of Venus and have intercourse with some stranger. When a woman has once seated herself, she must not return home till some stranger has thrown a piece of silver into her lap and lain with her outside the temple. He who throws the silver must say thus, "I beseech the goddess Mylitta to favor thee," for the Assyrians call Venus Mylitta. While modern scholars debate the accuracy of Herodotus's account, it testifies to the ancient recognition of Venus's sacred sexual aspect across cultures. The Queen of Heaven, under her many names, represented a cosmic power that transcended cultural boundaries, a force recognized universally as fundamental to both natural processes and human experience. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from Greece to Rome, her worship persisted across millennia because she embodied a principle that truly comes to all. It's extraordinary when you think about it. Civilizations that disagreed on virtually everything else still recognized the power of Venus. Perhaps that's the strongest evidence for her reality as a fundamental experience of being human across all cultures. One of the most profound insights into Venus's dual nature comes from Plato's Symposium, where he distinguishes between two distinct Aphrodites, each associated with a different kind of love. A philosophical distinction that would profoundly influence Western thought about love, desire, and beauty for millennia. In the dialogue, the character Pausanias explains, "We should not be called upon to praise love in such an indiscriminate manner. If there were only one love, then what you said would be well enough. But since there are more loves than one, we should have begun by determining which of them was to be the theme of our praises. I will amend this defect, and first of all I will tell you which love is deserving of praise, and then try to hymn the praiseworthy one in a manner worthy of him. For we all know that love is inseparable from Aphrodite, and if there were only one Aphrodite, there would be only one love. But as there are two goddesses, there must be two loves." Pausanias then elaborates on these two goddesses, as we previously mentioned. The elder one, having no mother, who is called the heavenly Aphrodite, she is the daughter of Uranus. The younger, who is the daughter of Zeus and Dione, her we call common, and the love who is her fellow worker is rightly named common, as the other love is called heavenly. This distinction between heavenly Aphrodite, Aphrodite Urania, and common Aphrodite, Aphrodite Pandemos, became a cornerstone of Platonic thought about love. The two Aphrodites represent two different kinds of attraction and desire. The love, who is the offspring of the common Aphrodite, is essentially common and has no discrimination, being such as the meaner sort of men feel, and is apt to be of women as well as of youths, and is of the body rather than of the soul. The most foolish beings are the objects of this love, which desires only to gain an end, but never thinks of accomplishing the end nobly, and therefore does good and evil quite indiscriminately. In contrast, heavenly Aphrodite inspires a nobler form of love. But the offspring of the heavenly Aphrodite is derived from a mother in whose birth the female has no part. She is from the male only. This is that love which is of youths, and the goddess being older, there is nothing of wantonness in her. Those who are inspired by this love turn to the male and delight in him who is the more valiant and intelligent nature. While Plato's distinction specifically addresses male homosexual love, reflecting the cultural norms of ancient Athens, the broader philosophical principle transcends these specific applications. Heavenly Aphrodite inspires love directed towards spiritual and intellectual beauty. while common Aphrodite inspires physical and sensual desire. This Platonic distinction resonates with Jung's psychological understanding of Venus's dual aspects. In Mysterium Conjunctionis, Jung discusses alchemical symbolism that parallels Plato's two Aphrodites. Venus alba et rubea, white and red Venus, aurum nostrum and aurum vulgi. The white Venus, Venus alba, corresponds to heavenly Aphrodite, spiritual, purified and elevated, while the red Venus, Venus rubea, corresponds to common Aphrodite, physical, passionate and earthly. Francis Yates, in The Art of Memory, describes how Renaissance philosophers incorporated this dual understanding of Venus into their cosmological systems. The virtue and vice system is related to the good and bad sides of planetary influences, and the reform is to make the good sides triumph over the bad, and to emphasize the influence of good planets. Hence, there is to result a personality in which Apollonian religious insight combines with jovial respect for moral law. The natural instincts of Venus are refined into a complexion more gentle, more cultivated, more ingenious, more perspicacious, more understanding. And a general benevolence and philanthropy is to replace the cruelties of the warring sects. This refinement of Venus's influence represents the Platonic ideal of elevating common Aphrodite toward heavenly Aphrodite, not rejecting physical beauty and love, but transforming and spiritualizing them. Plato himself in the Republic expresses concern about inappropriate depictions of divine sexuality, specifically mentioning Venus, Ares and Aphrodite. I'm strongly of opinion that they ought not to hear that sort of thing. This censorious attitude toward Homer's tale of Venus and Mars, caught in Hephaestus's net, reflects Plato's concern that such stories emphasize common Aphrodite at the expense of heavenly Aphrodite. The distinction between heavenly and earthly forms of Venus has profound implications for how we understand love, beauty, and desire. It suggests that the same fundamental force can manifest in different ways, from purely physical attraction to spiritual longing for the divine. Rather than rejecting one in favor of the other, the philosophical tradition initiated by Plato sought to recognize both as aspects of the same principle while encouraging the elevation of the common toward the heavenly. This philosophical framework provided Western culture with a way to reconcile the apparent contradiction between spiritual aspirations and physical desires, not by denying the latter, but by understanding both as manifestations of the same fundamental Venus principle, operating at different levels of existence. We still struggle with this integration today. Our culture simultaneously hypersexualizes and shames desire, elevates romantic love while treating it as frivolous. We're still trying to reconcile Plato's two Aphrodites, still learning that the path to the heavenly runs straight through the earthly. The two Aphrodites represent not a rejection of Venus's dual nature, but an integration of it, recognizing that the force that draws bodies together in physical union is fundamentally the same as the force that draws souls toward divine beauty. Venus, in both her heavenly and earthly forms, truly comes to all. Beyond myth, magic, and philosophy, Venus exerted influence on human life through her celestial manifestation as the brightest planet in our sky. The ancient art of astrology, a sophisticated system for interpreting planetary movements as meaningful patterns, attributed specific qualities and effects to Venus that shaped human character and destiny. No astrological authority provides a more comprehensive account of Venus's influences than Ptolemy in his Tetrabiblos. Written in the 2nd century CE, this foundational text codified centuries of astrological tradition and articulated Venus's nature in precise detail. To Venus also the same temperate quality belongs, although it exists conversely, since the heat she produces by her vicinity to the sun is not so great as the moisture which she generates by the magnitude of her light, and by appropriating to herself the moist vapors of the earth in the same manner that the moon does. This physical description of Venus's influence, moist and moderately warm, corresponds to her astrological significance as a benefic planet associated with harmony, pleasure, and fertility. Ptolemy continues, Two of the planets, on account of their temperate quality, and because heat and moisture are predominant in them, are considered by the ancients as benefic, or causes of good. These are Jupiter and Venus, and the Moon also is so considered for the same reasons. Venus's status as a benefic planet makes her a generally positive influence in astrological interpretations, bringing harmony, beauty, pleasure, and abundance where she appears prominently in a natal chart. Ptolemy also associates Venus with femininity and nocturnal qualities. The Moon and Venus are therefore said to be feminine since their qualities are principally moist. The Moon and Venus are esteemed to be nocturnal. These associations reflect Venus's connection to receptivity, fertility, and the mysterious qualities of night and darkness. Beyond these general qualities, Ptolemy provides detailed descriptions of how Venus influences specific regions of the zodiac. For example, those stars in Taurus, which are in the abscission of the sign, resemble in their temperament the influence of Venus, and in some degree that of Saturn. The stars in the feet of Gemini have an influence similar to that of Mercury and moderately to that of Venus. These subtle distinctions allow for nuanced astrological interpretations based on Venus's relationships with different celestial regions. Venus also rules specific signs of the zodiac. Venus, possessing a favorable temperament and placed beneath the sphere of Mars, takes the next two signs, Taurus and Libra. These are fruitful and preserve harmony by the sextile distance, and this planet is never more than 2 signs distant from the Sun. Taurus and Libra, an earth sign and an air sign respectively, embody different aspects of Venus's influence. Taurus representing her sensual material qualities, and Libra her harmonizing relational aspects. Venus also has special dignity in certain signs. Venus is of a moist nature and becomes chiefly moist when in Pisces. Under that sign, a dampness begins to be perceptible in the atmosphere, and Venus, from being in that sign, derives an augmentation of her own proper influence. Her exaltation is consequently placed therein, and her fall in Virgo. This exaltation in Pisces represents a position where Venus's qualities can express themselves most fully, while her fall in Virgo, the sign opposite Pisces, represents a position where her influence is somewhat constrained. Beyond abstract planetary qualities, Ptolemy describes how Venus shapes human character when prominent in a birth chart. Venus operates in a manner similar to that of Jupiter, but at the same time more becomingly and more gracefully, producing qualities of a nature more applicable to women and female beauty, such as softness, juiciness, and greater delicacy. She also peculiarly makes the eyes beautiful and renders them of an azure tint. This attention to physical qualities extends to anatomy, with Ptolemy noting that Venus rules the nostrils, the liver, and the flesh. When Venus combines with other planets, she produces complex character traits. For example, when with Mercury, Venus makes men lovers of the arts, philosophical, of scientific mind and good genius, poetical, delighting in learning and elegance, polite, voluptuous, luxurious in their habits of life, joyous, friendly, pious, prudent, fitted for various arts, intelligent, not misled by error, quick in learning, self-teaching, emulous of worth, followers of virtue, copious and agreeable in speech, serene and sincere in manner, delighting in exercise, honest, judicious, high-minded, and continent in desire as regards women. When in a less favorable position, however, this same combination could produce negative traits. When so conciliated and posited adversely, she will make men oppressive, fit for various arts, evil-tongued, unsteady, malevolent, fraudulent, turbulent, liars, calumniators, faithless, crafty, insidious, practiced in evil, uncourteous, debauchers of women, corrupters of youth, fond of personal adornment, dissolute, infamous, notoriously offensive and publicly complained of, yet striving after all things. These detailed character delineations show how astrology used Venus's influence to explain human personality, behavior, and fate. Beyond individual character, Venus affects professions and occupations. Should Venus have dominion of the employment, she will cause persons to be engaged in the various perfumes of flowers, in unguents and wines, and also in colors, dyes, and in spices. Thus she will produce vendors of unguents, garland makers, wine merchants, dealers in medical drugs, weavers, dealers in spices, painters, dyers, and vendors of apparel. Venus also influences health and manner of death. Venus produces death by disorders of the stomach and of the liver, by scurvy and dysentery, also by consumption or wasting away, and by fistula and poison, and by all diseases incident on the superabundance or poverty of moisture and its corruption. These detailed correspondences create a comprehensive system for interpreting Venus's influence on every aspect of human life, from character and appearance to profession, relationships, health, and even manner of death. The astrological Venus represents a systematic attempt to understand how the Venusian principle manifests in human life and destiny. While modern science has abandoned the causal mechanisms proposed by ancient astrology, the psychological patterns and archetypal meanings associated with Venus continue to guide us. Before dismissing this as ancient superstition, consider how we still use Venus's language. We call attractive people stars, speak of chemistry between lovers, and talk about orbiting someone we're attracted to. The astrological Venus might be more embedded in our thinking than we care to admit. Through astrology, Venus truly comes to all aspects of human life, a celestial influence that shapes character, determines fate, and connects individual destiny with cosmic patterns. We began our exploration with an etymology, Venus because venit ad omnia, and having traversed astronomical, psychological, mythological, magical, philosophical, and astrological dimensions, we return to this fundamental recognition. Venus is the force that truly comes to all. Throughout this journey, we have encountered Venus in multiple manifestations. As a celestial body, the brightest planet in our sky, appearing as both morning and evening star, moving in mathematical harmony around the sun. As a psychological archetype, the tension of opposites between heavenly and chthonic, creative and destructive, the primordial mother image that Jung recognized as a fundamental pattern in the human psyche. As an alchemical principle, the transformative substance that turns base materials into precious ones, that facilitates the sacred marriage of opposites, that enables psychological individuation. As a magical power, invoked through ritual and incantation, summoned to influence love and desire, called upon to harmonize discordant elements. As a natural force, the creative principle celebrated by Lucretius, the generative power that brings forth life and sustains it through cycles of death and rebirth. As a literary character, the active goddess of Homer's epics who intervenes in human affairs, protecting her favorites and pursuing her desires. As a cross-cultural deity, worshipped across civilizations as Ishtar, Aphrodite, Venus, Astarte, recognized universally as a fundamental cosmic power. As a philosophical concept, distinguished by Plato into heavenly and common forms, representing spiritual and physical manifestations of the same essential principle. As an astrological influence, shaping human character, determining fate, connecting individual destiny with cosmic patterns. This multiplicity itself reveals something essential about Venus. She is not confined to a single domain or manifestation, but permeates all aspects of existence. She is truly the goddess who comes to all. This recognition has profound implications for how we understand love, beauty, desire, and connection. These are manifestations of a cosmic principle that operates throughout nature and consciousness. The same force that draws atoms together in chemical bonds, that attracts celestial bodies through gravity, that pulls flowers toward sunlight, also draws human beings toward beauty and toward each other. Venus represents the principle of attraction itself, the fundamental tendency of the universe toward connection, harmony, and generation. This principle manifests differently at different levels of existence, from physical to psychological to spiritual, but remains essentially the same force operating throughout. In contemporary terms, we might understand Venus as the principle of relationship, the recognition that nothing exists in isolation, but always in connection with others. This relational understanding of reality aligns with insights from various fields, from quantum physics, where particles exist in states of entanglement, to ecology, where organisms exist in complex interdependent systems, to psychology, where identity forms through relationship with others. Francis Yates, in The Art of Memory, describes how Renaissance thinkers sought to harness Venus's power for spiritual transformation. Through Venus and her son Cupid, we seek the unifying force of love, the living spiritus of the living world, as in Bruno's Religion of Love and Magic. This unifying force of love represents Venus's ultimate significance. She is the principle that connects all things, that brings harmony out of chaos, that generates new life from the union of opposites. Cicero, whose etymology began our exploration, understood that Venus represented something fundamental to existence itself. When he wrote that she was named Venus because she comes to all things, ad res omnes veniret, he was acknowledging that she represents a universal principle operating throughout reality. From the foam-born goddess emerging from chaos to the astrological planet influencing human destiny, Venus represents the recognition that attraction, beauty, and harmony are fundamental cosmic principles that fractalize into subjective human experiences. The goddess who comes to all reminds us that we exist in a universe defined not only by forces of separation and distinction, but equally by forces of connection and union. As we conclude our exploration, we might consider that Venus's continued relevance in human consciousness, from ancient myth to modern psychology, from classical art to contemporary science, reflects her status as a representation of something essential to existence in itself, a recognition of a principle that truly does come to all. In the resonant words of the Orphic hymn, "'Tis thine the world with harmony to join, for all things spring from thee, O power divine." Perhaps Venus's greatest gift to us is the recognition that connection, not isolation, is our natural state. We are polarized and separated. But Venus reminds us that we belong to each other, maybe more crucial than ever. Venus comes to all and reminds us that we are all ultimately part of the same cosmic miracle of attraction, connection, and creation. Venus because venit ad omnia, she comes to all.